Welcome to episode 3 of How to Invest in Real Estate. This episode's title, Flip It or Rent It. With me is Robyn Dempsey, our top agent from 2021. Robyn sold $28 million of real estate last year and is extremely experienced at working with various investors and builders. So I wanted to have her on today to talk about this topic because it is really important. So when we're talking about flipping it or renting it, there's two different avenues that you can take in an investment property. It's long-term or short-term. So if long-term, the renting it part, or short-term, the flipping it part, knowing that upfront is crucial to having a successful real estate project. Robyn, when we're talking about flipping it or renting it, we need to understand that needs to be decided before the project even gets started, right? So what are some things that you talk about with your investors to make sure that they are on the right path and making the right decisions before they even get started on purchasing a property?
So when deciding between a flip or a rental, you really need to figure out what your end goal is. So a flip can be great for quick cash, but a rental is going to be a long-term goal. You're creating wealth that can go on for 10, 20, 30 years versus a flip where you've got one payout. So that's a huge thing. And then another thing that I like to talk to people about when determining that goal is your budget. Budget and what your plans are moving forward are crucial to deciding which avenue you'd like to take.
Right. So thinking about it this way, flip is all about bottom line, right? We're talking about profit. That's really what we're focused on. Purchase property plus costs and other expenses and what we have left over. That's our primary goal when we're investing in a flip, something we're going to turn over quickly. When we're looking at a rental property, we're thinking mainly long-term, and that's cash flow. So we're going to be investing in the property. We're going to be purchasing it. But then what monthly expenses will we continue to have on this? What can we rent the property for? And then what's left over every month? And that's really our focus on the rental side of it. So you mentioned budgeting before. When we're dealing with coming up with a budget and when you're working with investors, some things you need to talk to them about when they're coming up with their budget, give them some tips and things that you deal with and coming up with a plan for each investor on the budget.
Absolutely. From a flip standpoint, obviously you need to have a lot of cash on hand. So you are looking at purchasing the property, down payment if you decide to take out a loan, closing costs, and then immediately following, you have to pay for those repairs. So if it needs a new roof, you better make sure that you have, $7,000 to $10,000 laying around depending on the size of the property. So those things are very, very crucial in doing this. You've got to pay your vendors, and then you can have a closing after you go to sell. Whereas with a rental, like you said, there's monthly costs. So if a water heater goes out, if some siding goes out because of a lawn mowing accident, which happens all the time, I feel like. So those are just different things that you're going to have to battle. So it's really your stomach and gut. So it's upfront costs versus long-term costs. So there's a lot that goes into choosing which avenue is best for you.
Right. And so when we're thinking about this, some things to think about too on the side, when we're thinking about long-term rental and that, for people that's for various reasons, a lot of people, I'm looking at this for retirement income. I'm looking at it for supplemental income. I'm looking at it potentially to live in this property down the road. I'm looking at it for my kids down the road. There's a lot of reasons for it. Some things to think about on the long-term side, especially too, is, we talked about cash in an earlier episode, having cash. When you invest long-term, you need to remember that cash is going to be in that property and it's not coming back out right away. Can you afford that? Something else that we talk about too is a lot of people will buy a rental property and forget, oh yeah, I have to renovate it as well. So that remember, when we're dealing with the long-term holds, that when you're investing in that property, realize that money's going to stay in that property and you're going to get repaid over time in rent. Okay. On the flipping side, right, we're talking about net profit. We're going to get that money back out quicker. Okay. So it's different avenues. So let's talk about that. We touched on it earlier, but let's talk about strategies on purchase price. Different for those different avenues.
Right. So again, everything's very different. It depends investor to investor. I have some investors that have a net goal on flips that they have to reach. In regards to renting, you've really got to look at the market value. So if one neighborhood is renting for $1,500, but your mortgage payment on that rental is going to be $2,000 a month, then those numbers probably don't work. So you definitely need somebody that's going to scour and figure out what those numbers are to make sure that your long-term goal is actually going to be met.
Yeah. So for purchase price strategy is different. On a flip, we've got to be real careful that you don't overspend, because once you factor in the renovation costs with that purchase, it's going to affect your bottom lines. Every dollar you spend on that property over what you think you should spend is potentially going to hurt your bottom line. on long term, we have some investors that can buy new construction homes at market value and still generate cash flow. So different strategy completely. Investors tend to think, oh, I've got to get the lowest possible price. And that's true to some extent. But when we're looking at it from a long-term hold standpoint, you can buy a property potentially at market value and still generate good cash flow, and it can still be a good investment property. On flips, it may be a little bit different scenario. We talked about budgeting before. We talked about coming up with a budget. We touched on it, but we didn't really go into contractors. So talk a little bit about how important it is to have a good contractor.
Oh, it's very important to have a good contractor. What is it I always tell people? The cobbler's children have no shoes. So you really need somebody that knows what they're doing. You've got to get things painted. You've got to have somebody show up in a timely manner. And a lot of that, especially when you're doing a flip or even a rental, you can't generate any of that income until you have a good contractor, a good lead, someone that's going to show up. And really, you need an arsenal of good people just in case anything goes out, unless you have a property management company sorting through all that.
We're going to go through contractors in a later episode in a little more detail, but that's also part of your budget. All of this, again, is done before you purchase the property. Don't wait till after to decide if you're going to flip it or rent it, because it could put you in a tougher spot, especially if you're trying to turn that property around quickly. So, Robyn, a couple of things that you do with your investors to help them get to the finish line of each investment property. I want to make sure everybody realizes that, again, working with somebody experienced like Robyn is crucial in this scenario, especially when you're starting out, because there's a lot of resources online, but you need that validation. And she's got the resources and experience in this market to be able to help you understand what you need to be doing and how you need to be doing it.
Absolutely. With over 5 years of experience with the company, we have great vendors. We have great intel. We have a pulse on the market every single day, not just once a month when we decide to check a lead or a website or somewhere else that you can possibly get information. And a lot of those websites actually misrepresent the information day to day. So it is my job to make sure that we really know what is going on in every aspect of that market.
Right. You need that expert opinion, especially in the beginning when starting out, to make sure you're making good choices that we can get you through, and especially based on your goals, and come up with a customized plan with you and make sure you're on the right path. Thanks for joining us, Robyn.
Thanks for having me.